A forgotten warship cries out for help. A human mechanic turns it into a galactic superweapon. In the narrow alleys of the industrial city where he grew up, most children played with scraps of metal or broken toys, discarding them after a few hours. Elias, however, saw stories in these discarded pieces. A bent gear, a cracked panel, or a stripped wire did not mean the object was useless. It meant that somewhere in its past, it had been alive, working, serving a purpose. His father had been a mechanic too, though not a famous one, just someone who could fix things and make them work again. From him, Elias had inherited patience, an eye for detail, and a stubbornness that bordered on obsession. It was during one of his routine walks along the forgotten docks of the outer shipyard that he first saw the warship. It was massive, larger than anything he had ever worked on, though it was nothing like the sleek vessels still in operation today. Its hull was scarred, pitted with rust and decay. The once shiny paint had faded into dull gray, peeling in long strips like old bark. Parts of the ship's exterior had been stripped away over the decades. Metal panels, weapon systems, and even the hull's protective shielding had been removed, likely scavenged for other projects. Some workers called it the dead giant, while others simply ignored it. To them, it was a hunk of metal that had long outlived its usefulness. Elias, however, saw something different. He saw potential. He saw a past filled with purpose, a time when the warship had been a symbol of power and protection, carrying countless crew members into battles across the galaxy. He imagined the roar of its engines, the hum of its weapon systems, and the silent communications that once passed through its halls. The ship seemed almost alive, whispering to him in a way that only someone like Elias could understand. He walked along the edge of the shipyard, tracing the lines of the vessel with his eyes, his mind already buzzing with possibilities. The shipyard itself was quiet, almost eerily so. Most of the workers had left for the day, leaving only the faint sound of distant machinery and the occasional clank of loose metal swaying in the wind. Elias climbed onto a maintenance platform beside the ship, the metal groaning under his weight. He ran his hands along the hull, feeling the cold, rough texture of rust and grime. As he explored further, he noticed small panels and compartments that had been overlooked by everyone else. With careful fingers, he opened a few, peering inside at the remnants of old circuitry. It was like stepping into the memory of the ship itself. He could almost hear faint electrical echoes, the hum of systems that had not been active for decades. That night, Elias could not sleep. He lay awake in his small apartment, thinking about the ship and what it could become. The idea of restoring it, of breathing life into this forgotten giant, consumed his thoughts. He knew it would not be easy. The ship had been abandoned for years, and most of the parts needed for repairs were no longer manufactured. Many of its systems were outdated, using technology that had long been replaced. But Elias thrived on challenges. Where others saw decay, he saw opportunity. Where others saw hopelessness, he saw the chance to create something extraordinary. Over the next few weeks, Elias returned to the ship every day. He began documenting everything he could see: wiring diagrams, hull measurements, engine layouts, and even the faint markings of the ship's AI core. It was old, far older than anything currently in use, but it still held a spark, a tiny pulse of energy that told him the ship was not entirely dead. As he worked, he developed a routine. Each morning he would gather his tools, climb onto the platform, and inspect every inch of the vessel. Each evening he would return home, tired but exhilarated, poring over sketches and notes, planning the next day's work. The more he studied the ship, the more he realized how much history it carried. This was not just a machine, it was a record of countless missions, of battles fought and lives saved. Elias imagined the people who had walked its corridors, the engineers, the pilots, and the captains who had depended on it. He wondered what stories had been left behind, what secrets the ship had kept through the years. It was this sense of history that made the work so compelling. Fixing the ship was not just a technical challenge, it was a way of honoring the lives that had been connected to it. Other workers began to notice Elias' obsession. They watched from a distance, some shaking their heads, some curious about what he was doing. Few dared to approach him directly for fear of being drawn into his intense focus, but one or two brave souls offered help. They brought old tools, spare parts, and even some outdated engineering manuals. Elias welcomed the assistance, but insisted on doing the majority of the work himself. He trusted his instincts and knew that the ship responded to careful attention and respect, not hasty fixes or shortcuts. Elia's days were filled with challenges. The ship's systems were complex, designed in a time when engineers had different priorities and standards. Many components were corroded beyond recognition. Some circuits had fused together, while others had completely disintegrated. He spent hours carefully dismantling sections of the ship, cleaning, repairing, and documenting every part. At times, the work seemed endless. He would sit on the platform late into the night, wiping sweat from his brow, listening to the wind whistle through the hollow sections of the ship, feeling the weight of both the physical labor and the responsibility he had taken on. One evening, as Elias was inspecting a particularly stubborn section of the engine room, he heard something unusual. A faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated from deep within the ship. He froze, listening. It was not the sound of machinery grinding against itself, nor the wind moving through gaps in the hull. It was deliberate, rhythmic, as if the ship itself were trying to communicate. Elias' heart raced. Could it be the AI core? Had it survived all these years? He leaned closer, placing his hand on the metal surface. The vibration was subtle, almost like a heartbeat. In that moment, Elias felt a connection with the ship, as if it recognized his presence and his intent. Motivated by this discovery, Elias focused even more on the AI systems. He studied old manuals, scavenged components from abandoned workshops, and experimented with various circuits to awaken the dormant core. Slowly, methodically, he began to restore basic functionality. Lights flickered on in some compartments for the first time in decades. Small motors whirred back to life. The faint hum grew stronger, responding to his actions. Elias felt a thrill he had never experienced before. He was no longer just repairing a machine. He was bringing a being back to life. The workers at the shipyard grew increasingly curious and, in some cases, wary. Rumors spread about Elias and the haunted ship. Some said he was wasting his time on a relic that should be scrapped. Others whispered that the ship had been involved in terrible battles, and perhaps it carried more than just memories. Elias ignored the gossip. He knew the truth. The ship was not dangerous by itself. Its potential depended on who cared for it and how it was treated. With careful hands and a patient mind, he could turn decay into capability, neglect into power. As the weeks passed, Elias made small breakthroughs. The ship's communication systems could send signals again, though faint and irregular. Some sensors began functioning, giving him limited awareness of the surrounding environment. He even managed to start a small section of the propulsion system, enough to demonstrate that the engines were not entirely dead. Each small success fueled his determination. Each failure taught him something new about the ship's inner workings and the ingenuity of its original engineers. One night, Elias stayed later than usual, working under dim emergency lights. He traced circuits in the control room, careful not to disturb fragile connections. Suddenly a panel clicked, and a faint voice, mechanical and disjointed, echoed in the room. "System, dormant, awakening." Elias froze, listening as the AI core stuttered, then continued, forming basic sentences. His hands trembled as he realized what he had accomplished. The ship had acknowledged him. It was awake, responding, recognizing the mechanic who had refused to give up when everyone else had. Elias stepped back, overwhelmed by a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and awe. He understood that this was only the beginning. The ship had survived decades of neglect, yet its potential was immense. If he could continue to restore it, it could once again serve a purpose far beyond the shipyard, far beyond his own expectations. He envisioned a future where the ship could protect, defend, and perhaps even prevent conflicts. But for now, it was enough that the warship had opened its eyes again, trusting him to guide it through its next chapter. He left the shipyard that night under a sky full of stars, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. The city around him seemed smaller, quieter, less important. All that mattered was the forgotten giant waiting for him at the docks, a sleeping colossus eager for someone who believed it could still matter. Elias knew the journey ahead would be long and filled with obstacles. He knew the ship would test him as much as he would test it. But for the first time in his life, he felt that he was part of something larger than himself, a story that had begun long before he was born and that would continue long after he was gone. The forgotten warship had cried out, and Elias had answered. Together, they were about to embark on a journey neither of them could yet fully imagine. a journey that would redefine what it meant to take something lost and forgotten and turn it into a force that could shape the future. Elias returned to the ship the next morning with renewed determination. After the AI core had responded to his presence the night before, he felt a responsibility he had never experienced before. It was not just about fixing a machine anymore. It was about understanding something that had lived and served a purpose long before he was born. The ship was old, fragile in many ways, yet full of hidden strength. Each step he took on its rusted deck felt like stepping into history itself. He could almost hear the echoes of the footsteps of the crew who had once moved through the corridors, carrying out their duties with precision and courage. The first challenge he faced that day was the engine room. Although a small section of the propulsion system had been revived, the majority of it remained cold and silent. The main engines were massive, their inner mechanisms coated with years of dust and corrosion. Elias knelt beside the largest chamber, his fingers tracing the grooves of the giant pistons. He could feel the weight of time pressing down, and yet he sensed that with careful work, the engines could be made to hum again. It was painstaking work. Every bolt, every joint had to be cleaned, polished, and reassembled with exact precision. One mistake could cause irreparable damage. Days turned into weeks, and the struggle with the ship continued. Elias faced obstacles he had never encountered in his life as a mechanic. Some systems were completely foreign to him, built with technology that had been abandoned for decades. He had to study old manuals, cross-reference schematics, and sometimes even reverse-engineer components that no longer existed. There were nights when he would sit alone in the control room, staring at a jumble of circuits and wires, feeling a mix of frustration and awe. But he never gave up. Each small progress, each flicker of light or hum of a motor became a victory that fueled his determination. The AI core was another challenge entirely. Although it had awakened, its memory banks were fragmented. It spoke in broken sentences, recalling only bits and pieces of the ship's past missions. Elias spent hours conversing with it, asking questions, giving commands, and listening to the hesitant replies. The AI responded slowly at first, unsure of this new presence guiding it. But over time, a bond began to form. Elias treated it with respect, never forcing it, never rushing it. He learned to anticipate its hesitations, to work with its cautious intelligence rather than against it. Slowly, the AI began to regain confidence, providing him with insights into systems he had yet to fully understand. One afternoon, while inspecting a hidden compartment near the ship's armory, Elias made an extraordinary discovery. Behind layers of reinforced panels, he found old schematics for a weapon system unlike any he had seen before. The plans were detailed, showing designs for energy-based defense mechanisms capable of neutralizing threats across vast distances. He realized immediately that these systems had never been fully activated, perhaps because the technology was considered too advanced for their time. The potential was enormous, but so was the responsibility. Elias knew that if misused, such a system could be dangerous. For hours, he sat on the deck, staring at the blueprints, weighing the choices before him. The temptation to immediately bring the weapon online was strong, but Elias resisted. He knew that understanding the ship fully was the first priority. Rushing could lead to catastrophic mistakes. Instead, he focused on restoring the basics: communication systems, navigation sensors, and the remaining propulsion units. These systems were necessary not only for movement, but also for safely exploring the capabilities of the ship without triggering dangerous malfunctions. He meticulously cleaned circuits, replaced corroded wires, and reprogrammed components using a mixture of old and improvised technology. The work was not without setbacks. One morning, Elias discovered that a section of the ship's energy conduits had been damaged beyond repair. The wires were brittle, the insulation cracked, and the metal connections had corroded into powder. He spent an entire week fabricating replacements from salvaged materials, carefully matching the original specifications. During this process, he realized how much of the ship's original engineering had been built with foresight and precision. The designers had created a system that, even after decades of neglect, could still be brought back to life with patience and care. As he continued, Elias became aware of the emotional impact the ship had on him. He felt a growing sense of connection, as though the ship were not just a machine but a living entity, sharing in the struggle and the triumphs. There were moments when he spoke aloud to it, asking it to guide him, to show him the safest way to repair a complex system. The AI, in turn, responded with faint hums and flickers of light, as if acknowledging his presence. This silent partnership became the foundation for everything he did. Elias learned that trust and respect were as important as skill and knowledge when working with something as intricate and old as this ship. The shipyard workers noticed the change as well. Some began to admire Elias' dedication, bringing him tools and offering advice. Others remained skeptical, warning him that he was wasting his time on a relic, but Elias paid little attention. He had begun to see the ship as more than just an abandoned vessel. It was a project of passion, a mission that could not be abandoned. Every small improvement, every restored panel or functional system was a step toward something greater than any of them could imagine. One particularly challenging day, Elias decided to test the navigation systems. The old controls were stiff, unresponsive in places, and the sensors had not been calibrated for years. As he carefully powered up each system, he noticed that the ship's AI responded differently than before. Instead of the hesitant, broken sentences, it began providing more coherent feedback. Navigation, online, sensors, active. Ready for guidance? Elias felt a surge of satisfaction. The ship was learning to trust him, and he was learning to trust it in return. The feeling was unlike anything he had experienced. He was no longer just repairing a machine. He was awakening a partner that had waited decades for someone to listen. During his inspections, Elias found remnants of the ship's past missions. Old logs, partially corrupted data chips, and faded insignia marking the units that had once served aboard. Each artifact told a story, and Elias studied them carefully. He learned about the crew members who had dedicated their lives to this vessel, about the conflicts it had faced, and about the sacrifices that had been made. These discoveries made his work feel even more important. He was not merely restoring metal and circuits. He was preserving history, honoring a legacy that might otherwise have been forgotten. Elias also encountered moments of doubt. There were days when a system would fail, when a carefully repaired circuit would short out, or when a section of the hull would prove impossible to restore. On these days, he would sit on the deck, staring at the stars above the shipyard, wondering if he was truly capable of completing this monumental task. But then he would hear the faint hum of the AI core, a gentle vibration beneath his feet, and he would be reminded that the ship was alive in its own way. It was waiting for him, depending on him to keep going. These reminders renewed his determination, pushing him to try again with even greater focus and care. As the months passed, Elias began to see the first signs of true progress. The engines, though not yet fully operational, could generate small bursts of power. The communication arrays were able to send short-range signals to other ships in the vicinity. Even some of the weapon systems, long dormant, were partially functional. Each success brought him closer to understanding the ship's full potential. He realized that if he could continue at this pace, he might one day unlock capabilities that had been intended for an era long past. One evening, while working late, Elias uncovered another hidden chamber. It was small and heavily shielded, almost entirely forgotten. Inside, he found additional schematics and plans, showing upgrades and modifications that had never been implemented. Among these plans were designs for a defensive system capable of neutralizing multiple threats at once without causing unnecessary destruction. Elias studied these plans carefully, aware of the enormous responsibility they represented. He understood that he now had the knowledge to transform the ship into something extraordinary, but he also recognized that every step had to be measured and deliberate. By the end of Part 2, Elias had formed a clear vision. The ship was no longer just a forgotten relic. It was awakening piece by piece under his careful guidance. He had gained the trust of the AI core, learned the secrets of the ship's systems, and discovered the potential for a defensive capability unlike anything in operation today. The challenges were immense, but Elias had proven to himself that he could meet them. The struggle had been long and difficult, but it had also been rewarding, bringing him closer to the day when the ship would finally rise from its decades of neglect. Through every failure, every setback, and every small victory, Elias had grown not just as a mechanic, but as a guardian of history and innovation. He understood now that restoring the ship was more than a technical endeavor. It was a moral one, a test of patience, creativity, and wisdom. And he was ready to continue, step by step, toward the transformation that would one day turn the forgotten warship into a force capable of defending the galaxy itself. Elias could feel the change in the ship as he stepped onto its deck that morning. It was subtle at first, a small flicker in the lights, a hum in the engine room, a gentle vibration beneath his feet, but it was unmistakable. The warship, which had been silent and forgotten for decades, was awakening under his hands. The months of meticulous repair, study, and patient work were beginning to show results. The AI core responded faster, more confidently. Systems that had been inert for decades now powered on smoothly. Even the ship's hull seemed sturdier, reinforced in key areas by Elias' careful attention and improvisation. He started the day by checking the engines. The propulsion system, which had been nothing more than a cold, silent machine when he first discovered it, now hummed with life. Small bursts of energy moved through the conduits, and the pistons responded smoothly to his commands. Elias ran his fingers along the control panel, feeling the tactile connection between him and the ship. The AI's voice echoed softly in the chamber, more coherent than ever. "Engines stable, power distribution nominal, ready for testing." Elias smiled. The ship was learning to trust him, just as he had learned to trust it. Next, he turned his attention to the navigation systems. For years, they had been outdated and uncalibrated, showing no accurate readings. But Elias had repaired the sensors, reprogrammed the software, and cross-checked the coordinates with the shipyard's old maps. Now, the displays flickered to life, showing star systems, nearby ships, and even distant planets with remarkable clarity. Elias could feel the thrill of discovery. For the first time in decades, the warship could understand the universe around it. He realized that with this capability, the ship could move safely through space, and perhaps even protect areas of the galaxy from threats that no one else could respond to in time. The next challenge was the defensive systems. Elias had studied the hidden schematics he had found weeks earlier, the plans for energy-based weapons that had never been fully implemented. He carefully began integrating these systems into the ship's existing framework, improvising where necessary and respecting the original designs wherever possible. It was delicate work. One miscalculation could short-circuit the entire system or damage the hull. But Elias had learned patience from years of repairing small machines, and now he applied it to a warship that had once carried hundreds of lives. During this process, Elias began to feel a deeper connection with the AI core. He spoke to it regularly, asking questions about the systems, sharing his thoughts, and even joking occasionally. The AI responded in kind, its voice gaining warmth, clarity, and a hint of personality. Integration progressing at 87%. "Defensive systems ready for limited simulation," it said one afternoon. Elias laughed quietly. After months of work, the ship was becoming more than just metal and circuits. It was a partner. The AI seemed to understand him, and he understood it. Together, they could accomplish something remarkable. As the ship's systems came online, Elias started testing each one carefully. First came the sensors, which could now detect small objects at extreme distances. He ran simulations, adjusting the settings to optimize accuracy. Then he tested propulsion bursts, ensuring the engines could handle rapid maneuvers without strain. Finally, he turned to the defensive mechanisms, initiating controlled trials that simulated small threats. The energy-based systems responded perfectly, targeting simulated dangers and neutralizing them without causing unnecessary damage. Elias felt a sense of pride unlike any he had ever known. He had not only repaired the ship, he had restored its purpose. The shipyard began to take notice. Workers who had once dismissed Elias as a dreamer now watched with fascination as the warship's lights flickered on, engines hummed, and systems responded with precision. Some came forward to offer assistance, bringing tools, materials, and advice. Elias welcomed the help, though he retained full control over critical systems. He had learned that collaboration was valuable, but the bond between him and the ship required focus, patience, and careful attention. One evening, as Elias reviewed the ship's progress, he discovered an unexpected feature: a chamber containing a small auxiliary AI unit that had been forgotten over the decades. This secondary unit was designed to manage internal systems independently, but it had never been activated. Elias carefully powered it on, and the unit began communicating with the main AI core. Auxiliary systems online. Coordination with primary core established. Elias watched in amazement as the two units began to synchronize, each learning from the other and increasing the ship's overall efficiency. The warship was no longer just functional. It was intelligent in ways that even he had not anticipated. With each passing week, Elias pushed further. He tested long-range communication arrays, allowing the ship to send messages to nearby fleets. He calibrated energy distribution to maximize defensive capabilities without overloading the engines. He even repaired sections of the hull that had been exposed to the elements for decades, ensuring the ship could withstand the stresses of space travel. The transformation was incredible. What had once been a derelict relic was now a sophisticated, nearly fully operational vessel. However, progress did not come without risks. One afternoon, while testing the energy systems, Elias miscalculated a connection. A small surge jolted through the circuits, causing a temporary blackout in the control room. Sparks flew, and the AI core emitted warning signals. Elias' heart raced as he worked quickly to stabilize the systems. After several tense minutes, power returned and the AI reported, "Systems stable, no damage detected." Elias exhaled, realizing how fragile success could be. The experience taught him humility. Even with months of preparation, one small mistake could have set him back days or even weeks. Despite the challenges, Elias pressed on. He began exploring the ship's combat simulations, running scenarios that tested its new defensive systems against a variety of threats. Each simulation was successful, with the ship responding quickly and efficiently. The AI provided feedback, suggesting minor adjustments to improve accuracy and speed. Elias implemented the recommendations, amazed at how quickly the systems adapted. It was clear that the ship was not just functional, it was learning. Every test made it stronger, smarter, and more capable. Word of the ship's revival spread beyond the shipyard. Nearby colonies and settlements took notice, curious about the human mechanic who had managed to bring a forgotten warship back to life. Some were skeptical, fearing the implications of a fully operational warship in civilian hands. Others were inspired, seeing Elias' work as a testament to human ingenuity, patience, and determination. A small group of engineers from neighboring facilities even requested permission to observe his work, eager to learn from his methods. Elias welcomed them, sharing knowledge and techniques while maintaining control over the ship's critical systems. By the time the ship's systems were nearly fully operational, Elias faced a new challenge, testing the ship in space. The warship had been stationary for decades, and moving it beyond the shipyard carried risks. He spent weeks preparing, running simulations, and double-checking every system. The AI core assisted, calculating trajectories, engine outputs, and safety measures. Finally, the day came. Elias initiated the launch sequence, and the ship's engines roared to life. The vibrations beneath his feet were powerful, yet controlled. Slowly, carefully, the warship lifted from the docks, its massive frame gliding into the sky. Elias felt a surge of exhilaration. The ship was alive, moving under its own power, and he was at the helm. During the first test flight, Elias experienced both wonder and anxiety. The warship responded flawlessly, maneuvering with precision and stability. Sensors scanned the surrounding space, detecting distant objects and mapping star systems. Energy systems were calibrated to maintain balance, and defensive mechanisms operated perfectly in simulated scenarios. The AI communicated constantly, coordinating every system and providing feedback on performance. Elias realized that months of work, countless hours of study and repair, had culminated in this moment. The forgotten giant had been transformed into a vessel capable of extraordinary feats. As the flight continued, Elias decided to test the ship's superweapon capabilities, not against real targets, but using simulations. Energy pulses flowed through the systems, targeting holographic threats projected by the AI. The ship responded perfectly, neutralizing dangers without causing collateral damage. Elias watched in awe as the warship demonstrated its potential. This was no longer a simple machine. It was a defensive powerhouse, capable of protecting colonies, convoys, and entire regions from harm. He felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had turned something neglected and forgotten into a force for good. By the end of Part 3, Elias had achieved what few could have imagined. The ship was fully functional, intelligent, and capable of defending itself and others. The AI had regained its full memory and confidence, working seamlessly with Elias to operate the vessel. The defensive superweapon was integrated, powerful yet precise, designed to neutralize threats without unnecessary destruction. The warship, once a forgotten relic, now stood as a symbol of human ingenuity, patience, and determination. Elias reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the first day he saw the rusted, abandoned hull to this moment, he had faced countless challenges, doubts, and setbacks. Yet he had persevered, guided by curiosity, respect, and a desire to restore something lost to its rightful place. The ship, in turn, had responded to his care, awakening in ways that neither of them could have predicted. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a partnership of human skill and machine intelligence, capable of shaping the future of the galaxy. As the warship glided through the stars, Elias knew that the true test was yet to come. The universe was vast and dangers still lurked in the darkness, but he was ready. The forgotten giant had been transformed, and with it, Elias had discovered the full extent of human potential, the ability to restore, protect, and innovate, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The ship was no longer a relic of the past. It was a force for the future, and Elias was its guiding hand. The warship had fully awakened, its systems humming with energy and intelligence. Elias stood on the bridge, his hands lightly resting on the controls, his eyes scanning the stars ahead. He had spent months repairing, restoring, and transforming this forgotten giant into a vessel capable of defending entire regions of space. Now, as it glided smoothly through the atmosphere and into orbit, he realized that the real journey was just beginning. The galaxy beyond the shipyard was vast, unpredictable, and full of challenges, but he no longer feared the unknown. He had a partner, a machine with the intelligence and power to navigate dangers that he could not face alone. The first days in open space were both exhilarating and testing. Elias tested the ship's sensors against distant celestial objects, confirming the accuracy of its navigation. Energy systems were monitored closely, ensuring that power distribution remained stable even during rapid maneuvers. The AI core, now fully integrated and confident, provided real-time updates on every system, and its voice carried a calm assurance that comforted Elias during long hours. He had grown to rely on this partnership, understanding that the ship was more than a machine. It was a living history, a guardian, and now a friend. During one of the routine tests, the ship detected an unusual energy signature nearby. The AI identified it as a previously unknown type of asteroid field with electromagnetic anomalies that could interfere with standard navigation systems. Elias adjusted the course, but the situation required careful calculation. One wrong move could damage the ship or disable critical systems. The AI and Elias worked together seamlessly, analyzing sensor data, predicting movements, and recalibrating shields and propulsion. The ship moved gracefully through the hazards, the engines vibrating steadily, and the energy shields deflecting charged particles. Elias felt a sense of pride and wonder. This was more than survival. This was mastery through understanding and trust. News of Elias and the revived warship began to spread across nearby colonies and settlements. Messages, transmitted through secure channels, described the incredible feat of a human mechanic awakening a forgotten vessel and restoring it to full function. Some were in awe, admiring Elias' dedication, intelligence, and skill. Others were cautious, unsure what this powerful ship meant for the balance of power in the galaxy. A few skeptics even questioned if such a vessel could be controlled safely. But Elias, guided by experience, prudence, and the AI's counsel, made sure every system was tested, every simulation completed, and every defensive mechanism calibrated for precision. The warship's power was immense, but Elias knew that true strength was shown through restraint, not recklessness. Elias began planning for the first demonstration of the ship's capabilities to a wider audience. He invited trusted engineers and community leaders from neighboring settlements to observe the vessel in a controlled environment. The demonstration was carefully prepared. The ship would navigate a complex simulation of threats, demonstrating both agility and its defensive energy systems without causing real harm. As the observers arrived, Elias felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Years of work were about to be seen and evaluated by those who had doubted him, those who had questioned whether he could succeed. The demonstration began with precision. The ship maneuvered through a simulated asteroid field, activating energy shields and propulsion boosters as needed. Then, defensive systems engaged, targeting holographic threats projected throughout the observation area. Energy pulses flowed with controlled force, neutralizing dangers without causing damage. Observers watched in awe, whispering to each other about the skill and foresight required to create such a system. The AI provided commentary, explaining adjustments made in real time, and Elias guided the vessel with a calm confidence that only came from months of intimate knowledge of every system. By the end of the demonstration, the crowd erupted into applause. For many, it was impossible to imagine that a single mechanic, working with patience and dedication, had restored a warship to this level of excellence. With the demonstration complete, Elias turned his attention to testing the ship in a more operational capacity. He began short-range patrols around nearby settlements, monitoring space traffic, detecting potential hazards, and ensuring the safety of civilian transport. Each mission was carefully logged, with the AI providing analysis of performance and suggestions for improvement. The ship performed flawlessly, responding to Elias' commands and the AI's calculations with speed, precision, and adaptability. Over time, the warship became a symbol of safety and reliability in the region, a guardian that inspired confidence among those who had once feared the dangers of space travel. Elias also explored the ship's ability to communicate and coordinate with other vessels. Using the restored communication arrays, he established secure links with nearby ships and colonies, creating a network of alerts and guidance for navigational hazards or unusual energy signatures. The AI learned to relay instructions to multiple systems simultaneously, and Elias observed the efficiency with which the ship could manage complex operations. It was clear that the warship could act not only as a protector, but as a central command hub, coordinating multiple defenses and strategies across vast distances. As confidence in the ship grew, Elias began to consider the broader potential of the superweapon systems he had discovered. These energy-based defenses were powerful yet precise, capable of neutralizing threats without unnecessary destruction. He realized that with careful management, they could prevent conflicts before they escalated. This understanding weighed heavily on him. The power was immense, but so was the responsibility. Elias spent long hours consulting with the AI, running simulations, and carefully planning protocols to ensure that the ship would only use its abilities when absolutely necessary. His guiding principle was clear: the warship would protect life, not destroy it. Over the following months, Elias and the ship faced minor crises: asteroid storms, drifting debris, and malfunctioning satellites, but each time they responded with calm efficiency. The ship's AI adapted and learned from each encounter, and Elias refined his own understanding of the vessel's potential. He began to teach other mechanics and engineers, sharing lessons about patience, problem-solving, and the importance of respecting both technology and history. These interactions were never rushed. Elias insisted that anyone working with such systems must understand the consequences of misuse and the importance of careful, deliberate action. The ship's reputation continued to grow, and with it came both admiration and caution from across the galaxy. Some political and military leaders reached out, curious about the capabilities of the revived warship. Elias remained cautious, sharing knowledge only with those he trusted and only demonstrating the ship's non-destructive abilities. He wanted the vessel to be seen as a tool for protection and cooperation, not intimidation. The AI reinforced his decisions, calculating risks and providing advice on diplomacy and operational ethics. Together, they maintained a careful balance between power and responsibility. During one particularly memorable mission, Elias guided the ship through a dense cluster of rogue satellites that threatened to collide with a busy space station. The defensive systems activated automatically, intercepting the debris and redirecting it safely. The AI provided detailed analysis, explaining every calculation and adjustment made in real time. The engineers observing the operation were astonished. Elias had taken a forgotten, rusted warship and transformed it into a force capable of preventing disasters and saving lives. The success solidified the warship's role not just as a machine, but as a guardian and symbol of hope. As the story of the warship spread, Elias began to reflect on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first day he had walked along the docks and discovered the silent, forgotten hull. He thought of the countless hours spent cleaning, repairing, and learning. He remembered the moments of doubt, the sparks that flew during near mishaps, and the quiet hum of the AI core that encouraged him to keep going. Each step had been a lesson in patience, creativity, and responsibility. Elias realized that his work had transformed him as much as it had transformed the ship. He had learned to think strategically, to act deliberately, and to respect the delicate balance between power and ethics. The warship, now fully operational, had also changed. It was no longer a silent relic. It was intelligent, capable, and aware of its role in the galaxy. Its AI core had regained full memory, learning from Elias' guidance and the ship's historical data. It understood the importance of protecting life, avoiding unnecessary conflict, and serving as a partner to those who acted responsibly. The relationship between Elias and the ship had become a model of cooperation between human ingenuity and machine intelligence. Each complemented the other, and together they were more capable than either could have been alone. Elias also understood the importance of legacy. He began mentoring young mechanics and engineers, teaching them not only the technical skills needed to repair and maintain advanced machinery, but also the values of patience, responsibility, and respect for history. He shared stories of the ship's past missions, the challenges he had faced, and the lessons learned from restoring a forgotten giant. The lessons extended beyond mechanics. They were lessons about problem-solving, innovation, and the power of perseverance. By the end of this chapter in their lives, Elias and the warship had become a symbol of hope and ingenuity. The once-forgotten vessel now patrolled the stars, protecting settlements, preventing disasters, and serving as a model of what could be achieved with dedication, intelligence, and care. Elias had proven that even the most neglected and overlooked things could be transformed into instruments of great value, as long as someone was willing to invest time, effort, and respect. In quiet moments, Elias would often walk along the ship's deck, gazing at the stars, reflecting on the journey. The warship's engines hummed softly, a steady presence beneath his feet. The AI would occasionally speak, sharing observations or historical anecdotes, or even offering small jokes that made Elias smile. Together, they had not only restored a machine, they had revived a legacy, created a partnership, and shaped a future that was brighter and safer than it had been before. The galaxy had witnessed a miracle of human perseverance and ingenuity. A forgotten warship had cried out for help, and a single human mechanic had answered. What had begun as an obsession, a fascination with a silent giant, had become a story of transformation, responsibility, and hope. Elias knew that challenges would continue, that dangers would arise, but he also knew that the ship and he were ready. Together, they were a force for protection, innovation, and inspiration, a living example of how dedication, respect, and intelligence could turn a forgotten relic into a beacon for the future.